because it's the most dire, we're going to talk about that situation um, that could potentially take my life or injure me, right? And with that being said, you're going to hear a lot of the same things. We're going to reference a lot of the same personal safety and threat awareness type of topics that we did in our last meetup. However, some of you that haven't taken it, this is going to be a great chance for you guys to learn a little bit about that. And for those of us that were here on the last one, you're going to be able to see how now it starts to relate a little bit and refresh you a little bit, give you sharpen you up for those potential situations. But one thing that we could go into is Jamie did mention a few of the different things that I did, and one of the things that I don't believe she mentioned, she usually does, and surprising for this one, maybe she forgot, but I also did some hostage negotiating, and with that comes obviously a lot of de-escalation, obviously, right? Because those are something that's dire, but we're going to relate that in a sense to something that could then injure us or even worse, kill us, right? We're not talking about an ambush. We're not talking about just a full-on attack. We're going to talk about what makes a situation bad and that situation now trying to back out of it. Um, and the way that we're going to do it is we're going to do it in reverse. We're going to do it such as somebody is now about to attack us. We're getting those feelings, which we're going to talk a lot about. We're getting those feelings, those very threatening feelings. How do we react to those and what's happening to us physiologically when all that's happening? So a lot of this is going to seem kind of we're going to take different avenues. However, by the end, two things are going to happen. First, we're going to really streamline it so you can kind of break it down just into a few different topics and truly understand it. And also, we're going to open it up for questions and even some stories that you guys may even have just because we learn from those things and something that may have happened to you yesterday or 10 years ago, some type of situation, somebody else on the call right now may be able to learn from that as well, and we could pick it apart like we're going to do with one major scenario that we talk about in a lot of our classes. But before we get to that scenario, we're going to break some things down about positioning, about ranging, nonviolent postures, and then what's happening to you physiologically during those types of events, right? But she mentioned training law enforcement. So, I have a lot of different types of training that I've done with officers, and that's different types of officers and agents within law enforcement. And the one thing that I continuously see with them is hesitation, right? And it's hesitation for good reason, meaning they're hesitating for that good reason because they're being scrutinized. So one thing that I did also, other than just hostage negotiating, was I was what was called the State of Ohio's Use of Force Administrator. So that responsibility came with creating policy, creating lesson plans, training, and also helping defend or even prosecute officers that misused force. And one thing that I consistently saw when doing that was there were a lot of officers, and there's still officers right now on the street working in different capacities with criminals and potential criminals that they would literally tell me, they'd say, well, I pause or I hesitate because I don't want to get in trouble because we're being scrutinized so much. And one thing that if you don't know that I really want you to take from this is some have heard this statement before that one who hesitates loses, right? So, that even considering even what's called a heuristic decision, making a good decision fast is still better than a potential great decision slow, right? So if I could just make a good decision just for now, that's going to help me not hesitate and do what I have to do in order to first and foremost survive. So let's talk about this a little bit. One reason they hesitate is because they're not confident in what they're doing. They're not just afraid of being scrutinized, because if they were confident in what they were doing, then they wouldn't have to worry about being scrutinized because they're doing the right thing. So it's always about doing the right thing with them. That's why they're being scrutinized. So let's try to do the right thing, at least learn how to do the right thing today in saving ourselves. We asked last time, does everybody have somebody that they care about? Does everybody have somebody that cares about them? And if you do, then that gives you almost the worth. If you don't have that own self-worth, then at least do it for them. And then the third would be do it for that individual that could potentially be a victim down the road, right? So I want to try to nail all these things shut so then I'm safe. My family's possibly safe. And then even that stranger I don't know could be potentially safe because I'm doing the right thing and protecting myself and then being justified, not liable for what I did. So we got to break down the whole situation. So let's, like I said in the very beginning, let's back out of that potential attack. We first have to understand pre-instant indicators. Looking and surrounding our surroundings, keeping our head on a swivel, seeing somebody approach us, first of all, should set off those awareness flags, right? Those red flags should be coming up. The next thing I want to be doing is not just physically, but the next thing I want to be doing mentally is I want to be looking for what's called pre-contact cues. We're not talking about the individual that comes in that's upset about a contract they may have gotten or how they were treated by customer service. We're talking about somebody. Give you this scenario: you cut somebody off, and now you don't realize it, and this person is now approaching you, and they're very visibly upset, right? That could potentially escalate into a bad situation. So just from that situation alone, how are we now protecting ourselves, protecting our own little bubble, and even people that are with us, and then trying to talk them out of potentially hurting us, right, or getting into a bad situation. We have to always remember too, this person is just a person. Um, I don't know what their wants and needs are, but I do know that I'm not going to give them me moving, first of all, from point A to point B. I'm not going to give them my body, and I'm not going to certainly give them my life. So if I have that line in the sand already, I know I have to do what I have to do to start to protect myself. So the very first thing is before I even understand pre-contact cues, which we'll get into, I have to understand what am I doing physically. Three things I have to start to gauge. First thing is how far away are they? We call that ranging. What I want to do is I want to create what's called a reactionary gap or maintain or end up having that reactionary gap as much as I can before the actual attack. That reactionary gap is a little bit different from what we call personal space. So let's talk about personal space. Personal space to most of us is an arm's distance away. That's my personal bubble. But let's think about that for a second. If somebody's within my personal space, they're probably very close. Like picture somebody just being an arm's distance away. That's usually reserved for our family members, people closest to us, or if we have a type of a job, say a physician, a nurse, somebody that's actually hands-on with somebody, those are the people now that are consistently in our personal space. And we'll touch on the physician and medical staff thing here in a second. However, just for me, I know if somebody's within an arm's distance, a few things have to start happening. I have to start thinking, at least my awareness flag is going up. Secondly, I have to start doing something physically to be able to protect myself if this were to go south. We talk about that reactionary gap compared to personal space. And I would just ask the question, is there anybody on this call right now or in this training that would give me your personal information? And if you wouldn't do that, then why would you let me or anybody within your personal space that you don't know personally? So the first thing that we talked about is trying to maintain that personal space. I'm sorry, reactionary gap beyond personal space. And that typically is within two arms length. Once I have two arms length of distance, I can now see them with my peripheral vision also moving forward and backwards. And I can also, once I don't see their feet anymore, you can see this in some of our physical classes. Once I can't see their feet within my peripheral vision, I know now they're too close. And I'm not going to look down at their feet. I'm going to be looking within their facial region. However, once they start moving and I don't see that anymore, that should trigger something that says this person is way too close to me. So then that triggers the next. I have to be ready physically. And by physically, what I mean is simply what are you doing with your hands? If you start to encounter something that's making you feel a little bit off, or you start to see some of those pre-contact cues, which we'll talk about, that's my cue then to start taking my hands out of my pockets, to start getting my hands up above my waist, not from my sides, basically in front of me. And there's four nonviolent positions that we usually teach on, one of which we'll go into next training on Thursday, about interpersonal communication skills and some things you may want to avoid, which is arms folded, which is one of them. However, I do want to have at least what's called an interview posture. That's my hands in front of me, above my waist, or hand on my chin. Most importantly, now, defensive posture, me just showing my palms to the individual. And let's just talk about that for a second. If I were to take a picture of anybody putting their palms towards another person, nothing verbal, but just show you that picture, everybody would say, well, that person that has their hands up, they're typically the defender in that situation, where the other person is typically an aggressor. So where that helps us then is for bystanders. Bystanders, if they're seeing me with my hands up this way in a defensive posture, they typically will think, okay, wait, this person is not the aggressor. This person is possibly in danger. And for the small chance that they're going to help me instead of recording it on their phone, that's going to be more hands-on and more eyes that I have on that situation. So now, when do I go to defensive posture? Two times I would tell you your hands have to be up in front of you, and that's when you have that feeling, that intuition of an imminent attack, or they're just way too close. And that's a person that's an unwanted type of close. So my hands will go from hand on chin, arms folded, or interview up to that defensive posture, not just showing bystanders, also showing that individual, hey, I don't want what you have for sale here, but also now this is also protecting my computer. So in the event that they grab me, in the event that they swing on me, push me, pull me, do whatever they have to do, where now they're getting physical, my hands are already in a position to where I can help protect this computer, that if it gets shut down, even for a split second, my whole body gets shut down. So I want to have these in between me and that individual. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, what that does is it creates an obstacle. And the way that our brains are set up is, as human beings, we're creatures of habit, A, and B, we don't like obstacles. We don't like barriers. That's what we're lazy by nature, right? That's why, we always try to avoid obstacles in a sense. That's why we give so much credence to actually going through that obstacle, really powering through, right? Whether it's a workout or a something I have to do for work, but that comes from us being lazy humans in a sense. So I want to create an obstacle in between myself and that potential attacker. That will create them to think, or make them start to think, I have to go around this, or I may even have to back up, which is a really common physical trait of somebody, what they're going to be doing in action, physical action, of when you put their hands up, a lot of times you'll notice they'll kind of lean back or step back, which is what we want. So that's the physical thing. The other thing I have to understand is positioning. There's four main positions, and we can relate this to combat sports, but four main positions that we want to recognize. The first one is, if I'm in front of this person, we're on equal playing ground, meaning I'm at my best advantage to be able to defend or attack, same as him. If I get to his side, I just created a better vantage point for myself. Obviously, the other side as well. But if I can get to his back, well, now he has a hard time fighting backwards, and it's easier for me to escape. However, that's my best vantage point. But let's flip that. If he gets to my side, I'm going to have to do what I can to try to angle myself so he's not. I want to be on equal playing ground. And if he gets to my back, I certainly need to turn around any way that I can do it, which we teach in our abduction prevention class. But simply speaking, I want this person in front of me, but I also want to think, if a train's coming down the tracks, I want to get off the tracks. So I want to start to move. So not only do I want to just get these hands up, I want to start getting out of my feet in concrete, and actually what we call in law enforcement, getting off the X, and what we teach, getting out of the circle. It's the same thing. It's me moving my hips, moving my feet to at least get off those train tracks. So simply put, these three things I have to understand. Proximity, which how close is this person? I want them to be in a reactionary gap, not personal space. Number two, what am I doing with my hands? What am I doing physically? And that's those four nonviolent postures to include defensive posture, which is the most important. And number three, where am I position wise on this person? So right now, a lot of people are thinking, well, man, this is de-escalation. Like, I thought we were going to be doing talking, but one major thing that a lot of people don't realize, and it's scary, is our body physiologically acts the same way in a physical fight or a potential physical fight that it does in a car crash or a near car crash. The same things happen. We talked about this in the last class. Physiologically, if I have that adrenaline dump, my blood pressure starts to go up, or I'm in a dire circumstance, things are going to slow down. If any of you have ever been in a car crash, you probably have seen this or felt this to where things almost seem in slow motion, right? But they're actually happening at full speed. And they say that your brain's searching for the right file to get out of the filing cabinet to handle that situation. But the other thing that happens is I have short-term hearing loss, short-term memory loss. I have tunnel vision. My blood rushes from my extremities to my major organs. My large intestines, they, in a sense, pause or slow down, then to put blood, conserve blood to my from my large intestines to my heart and lungs. I may start to shake, my breathing becomes shallow, my heart rate increases. All those things happen physiologically. And when that happens, guys, we then go from being able to use fine and complex motor skills to gross motor skills. So things are very gross in a sense, very large movements. But the other thing that could possibly happen is I can't talk. It's sometimes it's hard to even give directives or even to yell help or stop because my body is conserving anything it can just for survival. It goes back to the caveman fighting the saber-toothed tiger. We've been the same way as humans for years and years and years. So with all that being said, those three things, looking out for it, and now me starting to de-escalate, those hands being up is a form of de-escalation just because of the reaction that person may get. The second that I put my hands up, they know now that you are on the defense and you're not fighting. Now, can we fight from those hands up? Absolutely. My hands are actually now closer to the target if I have to fight. But remember, this is about de-escalation. We're trying to avoid the fight because what's the one fight that we don't lose? The fight that we don't get into, right? But by me putting my hands up, that's a form. And even if I have to be justified in this, if I have to write a post-attack communication, or if I have to write a report afterwards or my testimony, I'm going to put in that testimony that once this person was within my reactionary gap or my personal space, I try to de-escalate the situation by putting my hands up in a defensive posture, showing I am the defender. I don't want what you have selling. I don't want this attack. So that's one thing that your hands will do other than just attacking back, just for de-escalation. Once all those things we start to understand, and we also understand we may not be able to give those directives, now we start to think there's a fight that's potentially happening. I don't want this fight to happen. So if I can say something, I am going to say very, very simple words like, please no, back up. I don't want this. Help. Any of those things that now they hear and also bystanders may hear. And you keep hearing me talk about bystanders, but let me just hit pause for a second. I said we go down a couple of different avenues. Let's go down this avenue of, us relying on other people. We all know that there's more good people out there than bad, and we all know that everybody's not out there to attack us. But we also have this misconception that because there's more good than bad, that those people may actually help us in a dire situation. But what happens, guys, is when they are witnessing that dire situation, they also may suffer from some sympathetic nervous system effects. They may also go through fight, flight, or freeze. It's just like watching a car crash, right? Like a lot of times you can't speak, you can't talk for those few seconds. You're actually watching something major happen and you're frozen in time. So it's not always so much that they don't want to help. Sometimes they just can't help. So we can't always rely. And then there's the ones that just want to get it on their YouTube channel or put it on Instagram. that are just recording it. So for those reasons, guys, we can't count on anybody. We can't count on anybody, but if they do, buy them lunch and thank them. But just know they're likely not going to help for those few reasons. So what does that make me? That makes me my own de-escalator. It makes me my own first responder. It makes me my own bodyguard in a sense. So I have to understand, and the reason why we try to give you guys the information that we do, that we present it in this way, is right now we're not doing anything physical. We're not in a physical class. So what we're really doing for you guys is visualization. And visualization, guys, is a huge part of training. Any special operator will tell you that a lot of their training is just planning, visualizing, training, planning, visualizing. So if we could visualize the situation, we're going to present you guys with a scenario here in a little bit that we teach on quite a bit. You'll be able to put yourself in that position, and that's a form of training, actually thinking these things through. But the reason we do this isn't just for you to visualize, but it's to give you the why. As an adult teacher, I've been doing adult learning and adult teaching for a better portion of my life, and the one thing that I come to realize years and years ago was the more adults learn the why, because we're analyzers, right? The more we learn the why, the easier it is then for us to train and understand, and it's easier for us. So the why behind this is, well, they are frozen in time as far as the bystander goes, or they just don't want to participate because maybe they're scared, or maybe they, like we said, want to get it on their YouTube channel. Regardless, the why for me is I need to get home to my family. So understanding the situation that even though I want to de-escalate, I know where this potentially can go. And if I know where it could potentially go, my why is now I don't want to fight. However, I told you we were doing this backwards. If I'm in the fight, what am I doing to get out of the fight? And that's a little bit more physical. And we could touch on that if you guys have questions on that, if you weren't in the first two classes. But understand that that's what we're trying to avoid. And if I'm trying to avoid something, that means there's a potential for it. And if there's a potential for that fight, I have to do anything I can to lessen that percentage of that potential. So how do I do that? I understand ranging. I understand creating an obstacle, an illusion to everybody else that I am the defender. And also now, what position am I in? So with all this being said, let me present you guys with a scenario. So I just gave you guys three things. And we'll also talk about those three things that a predator always does. And then we're also, after this, going to talk about pre-contact cues, what this person looks like, things that they're going to be doing before they actually physically attack you. So the scenario goes like this, and this is a true scenario. This really happened, and we don't talk about this situation to say, well, she should have done this or she should have done that, or if she would have had training. We talk about it to learn about it, to break it down, put ourselves in this situation, and say, if I'm in this situation, these are the things I got to look for. So with me telling those few things to you guys, try to keep those in the back of your head, right? So here's how it goes. Here's how this goes down. There is an individual. She is waiting for an elevator. The elevator is actually in a parking garage, and the parking garage, it's in the evening, so it's a little bit darker. Where the elevator sits, there's only one way into that little foyer area, like little area where the elevator is, and one way out. There's a hallway going down, elevator. There's a window on the side where she's facing the elevator to her left. And now, while she's waiting for the elevator, an individual, a male, walks up behind her, and he's probably roughly 5 to 6 feet, maybe 7 feet at one time behind her. So think about everything that we just said: ranging, positioning. What am I doing with my hands? So just giving you that, I'm going to hit pause on this. I want you guys to think this through. How could she potentially physically and verbally even start to de-escalate a possible bad situation? And keep this in mind. We're not so much talking about de-escalating a physical fight. We're talking about, first and foremost, de-escalating an entire situation, but it's turning into de-escalating a possible fight. Thursday, we're going to talk a little more along the lines of de-escalating the situation. But now that I gave you guys a little bit of time, throw some stuff out there. What are some things that you guys could potentially start to do, or all of us potentially start to do to de-escalate that situation? I see Natalie says back towards the wall, not letting him be behind her. Yeah, it's great. What else? Would you turn and face him, speak, look for a way around him? Perfect. What else? Keep throwing them out there, guys, because this is an actual part of training. If I can visualize these things, put myself in that, what else could we do? All right. Well, we have at least I only saw two. So let's talk about this. They say turn and face. Speak to him. So somebody just put in speak to him with a question mark. And we're going to talk about that here. Uh, you could say, do you have a problem from Natalie? Or say stop. Could, but let's ask this simple question. What if he really doesn't want to harm me? What if he also just wants to get on the elevator? So let's think about our surroundings before we cover a couple of those. And thank you for participating, guys, because that's obviously how we learn, right? And I see your brains are cycling here. So let's just talk about this. If nothing at all happens, but the elevator door opens, where's she going? She's going into another cage, in a sense, with somebody that she doesn't know or knows very little. So if any of you have dogs, I would challenge you to take your dog and put it in your neighbor's crate and see what happens. It won't go in. We're the only species that actually will get into another cage with somebody else. So if we think about that, now it starts to kind of set into place. Well, maybe we shouldn't get in this elevator. And what we didn't talk about really in depth, at least on this call, was the feeling that we get. Did she get a bad feeling? Um, did she see some things that were off? Because he's standing just behind her. And something I didn't point out is she did look back. She turned and she went like this and then looked forward again, but she never turned her body. So let's break it down by those three things that we said already before I give you the rest of the scenario and talk a little bit more about it. First is what is she doing with her hands? She had a package in her left hand. Her right hand was free. Most people would say, well, make a phone call, fake a phone call, which she could do if she had one of those hands to be able to reach for her phone or if she had a phone. That's not a bad idea, but that still occupies my hands. The second thing is she didn't raise her hands at all. She had her hands down at her side. So let's learn from that. Somebody mentioned turn and face him. Now, obviously, I wouldn't just turn straight around, look him straight in the eyes, and say, you know what I think it was Natalie said, "Do you have a problem?" I probably wouldn't do that because obviously that's going to escalate something, right? However, I may engage or at least acknowledge and maybe not engage. I would acknowledge his presence. We talked about this last time. Every time you walk into Best Buy or some type of a store similar, um, Kohl's, Ross, any of those, they greet you. They greet you for that reason that they're acknowledging your presence. You are now less apt to go steal that TV that you were going to steal from Best Buy just because you know somebody knows that you're there. So the one thing I would do is somehow, some way, at least acknowledge his presence. Now I wouldn't turn all the way around. However, I would at least angle myself because what we say about positions, face to face, best position, but still at least to the side, I have a better vantage point to defend or get away. So now I at least want to angle myself. Somebody else mentioned finding a way around him. And nobody in these classes typically, at least initially, throws that out there. But when I tell you the end result of this, all of you, I would assume, would say that because we want to avoid the fight entirely. But before we get to that, what about the distance? I said about 5 to 6 feet, right? So just an arm's distance, well, that's approximately 2 to 3 feet. So now she is in that reactionary gap. So how does she maintain that? So backing herself against a wall or is at least turning and facing and now gaining that little bit of proximity is going to buy her more time if she does see him moving towards her. The other thing I would do is I would move away from those elevator doors. I would move almost to the side because then you can allow him to go in and you could decide to walk away or go in and angle yourself to where the buttons are. Personally, if I start to feel that weird gut feeling, I'm not getting in that elevator. Yes, let me see. Amanda says hit the emergency button. You could, but once again, we're relying on somebody else. Great forward thinking. But guys, remember this, you're your own first responder. So even if I hit it, I still have to decide and act on what am I going to do in that event that he starts to attack me. So yes, good forward thinking, but let's really dive into what am I going to do personally. So I need to open up that proximity first of all. I need to start and turn to angle my body towards him, and I need to get my hands free. So the end of the story is this. The individual, she never turned around, but he grabbed her by the back of the hair. He ripped her down. He stomped on her head several times. He paused. He looked down the hallway because he thought somebody was coming. And then he went back to her and he stomped her head until she was dead, just to steal her purse. He didn't know her. She didn't know him. He was found, prosecuted. However, the way we learn from this is how do we put ourselves in that situation and how do we get out of it? It's easy to say now that we know it, well, yeah, we're just going to leave, go back to our car, go back and wait, call 911, all those things. But is that really realistic to what we do every single day? If we're in a situation now where, guys, we talked about this the first two sessions, and I cannot express this enough. You have to believe in what you see, and you have to believe in what you feel. And if what you see and what you feel tells you something's off, believe in that. For as many cases or as many incidents I've been a part of, if I told you guys the statistic on how many people said, well, I had a bad feeling or I knew something was off before it happened, it's staggering. That's our body and our brain telling us something's not right here. And now, if we don't have that, it's a complete ambush. Well, then obviously there's no time to de-escalate physically or verbally, right? However, if I do have that time, one of those ways to de-escalate a possible violent situation is make it more difficult for that individual to be able to reach me or be able to do something effectively to me. So how do I do that? I do it once again by proximity and ranging. I do it by keeping my hands free up above my waist and in front of me to be able to react or at least show I don't want this. And thirdly, I want to try to get a better position. So all those things stand true. So now let's just go into, hey, if you have to get out, get out. Your odds on fighting somebody one-on-one should be the same odds as fighting 10 people. Because for three reasons, one-on-one, I'm outnumbered. I don't know if they have a weapon. I don't know if they have multiple subjects or multiple attackers, friends. And I don't know what their skill level is. If they're better than me, just even in that moment or on that day, and luck counts, guys. We can't count on luck, but luck counts in this situation. I potentially may lose, and I don't want to be in that potential loss. I don't want to have the potential to lose. I'm going to do everything I can to make this a winning situation. And a winning situation for me in that is to get out, get away, create space, come back later, use the elevator. If I'm late, I'm going to make a call, shoot a text. Hey, I'm a few minutes, a weird situation happened, whatever, blah, 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 and get there later because your life is ultimately, I can't go there anyway if my life is lost. So I have to start thinking, I have to start putting things into perspective and say, my life is the most important thing to me. My objective every day is to get home to my family. So what am I doing to protect that? And those three things are the three best things to do in a potential attack. As far as de-escalation goes, that's more of a physical de-escalation. But if we are able to say some things, let's talk about engaging now. You guys had some good points on some things to say. I wouldn't do anything to really open the door for an extended amount of engagement because that's possibly something they want. And they typically will want to move you, right? Even though he didn't because he saw nobody was around, she wasn't turning, she wasn't doing anything, or maybe he was just completely desperate. Out of desperation, he grabbed her. He needed that money, he needed that purse, he needed that whatever it was that he grabbed. However, if I start thinking about this and start thinking, I'm going to avoid the fight at all costs, how do I avoid the fight? I need to start looking. And for me to look, I need to be somewhat facing him. Same thing as talking. She probably likely wouldn't have said, acknowledge his presence, hello, how you doing? Or like somebody said, do you have a problem? She wouldn't have said that just facing the elevator. She would at least have to halfway turn to make eye contact. And that right there is one of the biggest things with trying to avoid issues is making eye contact. I may not even have to say anything. A head nod, eye contact saying, I see you, I know you see me, and then moving from there. Now, if you're able to start to actually say something, even just acknowledge, open the door slightly just for him to see that he sees you, but I wouldn't go too far as to have a conversation. And guys, we talked about this also in our last session, but guys, I'm sorry, a lot of times, I grew up as a male. I'm still a male today, and I can tell you the majority of my friends are we look at things a little bit differently. I think most females would probably agree with once you start talking to a male, the male then seems to talk a little bit more because that door for open engagement is there. So I would keep it pretty short. I would keep it professional, short, courteous, but I wouldn't do anything to start to escalate either that engagement or escalate his attitude in a sense, his violent attitude. So what I would do is at least acknowledge his presence. Now, if something starts to happen to where there is an attack or potential attack, getting loud, getting clear, and getting concise, that's going to be huge. I'm not going to just mumble something. I'm going to get it out there for everybody to hear. That goes along the lines with hitting that emergency button. I'm going to do anything that I can to get more eyes on the situation and possibly more hands, right? So I am going to say some things. I am going to talk very clearly and very concise with this individual. However, at the same time I'm doing that, I'm also maintaining that space. So these are all some things with de-escalation as far as physically. The one thing that I could tell you with verbally trying to de-escalate, some people will call it in law enforcement field, that verbal judo. Um, very keeping it very simple, such as if he starts to approach, stop, loud, clear and concise. Back up. I don't want you to come any closer. I feel unsafe. At least you're getting it out there to now they understand that you are seeing that they are a possible threat. In a lot of situations, when they see that, especially if you're a little bit louder, that's their cue to get the heck away because now it's not an easy target. And we talked in the last one about, what makes a good characteristic for a victim or prey for a predator. And that's one of the things, an advantage that I may have as an attacker over you. I want every advantage possible. And if we're alone, well, that's an advantage. If I'm bigger than you, stronger than you, meaner than you, that's an advantage. If I'm able to get you into a position to now you're having a harder time defending, such as I'm getting to your back or your side, that's an advantage. I want those advantages. So you have to start to cut those advantages simply by turning facing, hands up, creating space. Exactly what we've been saying the entire time. The other thing is don't be nameless and don't be faceless. This is used a lot of times in hostage negotiation, right? One thing they tell you, if you're taken hostage is to try to get as human as possible. And you maintaining that humanality by talking, showing your face, that not only is going to cut their advantage, but it's also going to humanize you to where they now start to almost question if what they're doing is right. It's not 100% accurate across the board, but there are humans, and most of us as good people can really feel that they don't want to damage another human. So if I could at least have a name or have a face, as we say in negotiation world, that person now starts to look at me as a human. So that's something else, just a little point. But what are give me some questions just off of that scenario, other than why did he do it, that you guys may have that we could teach off of here before we move on. All right. Maybe you guys aren't awake this morning, unless I'm not seeing them. What about yelling duck or something to confuse them? Yelling in that's from Kathleen. Kathleen, that's I mean you're forward thinking once again. I love it. Um, you could yell duck. Said when I read that, I thought you were talking about the actual duck, the animal. However, I guess yelling anything being verbal would help you. However, I would be a little more clear and concise on exactly what you want. Back up. Please give me some space. Things of that nature. Throw the package at them. You could, you could do anything you can before you run. However, let's just remember something. One thing that we consistently do with our students is think, if they did that to me, would it really hurt anything? Would it really do anything? So, what I want you guys to start doing with, and you'll see this a little bit more on Thursday, but I want you to start almost putting yourself in their shoes. If I threw, we get a lot of people that tell us when we do our active shooter and aggressor type of training, there have been schools that have said, well, we collect canned goods to give to the needy. However, we use those canned goods if there was an active shooter to throw at them. But let's break that down for a second. If somebody's throwing something at me, put yourself in that position. Is it really going to do any damage? And we talked about sympathetic nervous system effects. The one thing we didn't really mention in this Zoom was you don't feel pain. So anybody that works in a an emergency room will tell you, anybody that's ever come in with a gunshot or a stab wound, one of the first things they always say is, I didn't even know I was shot at first, or I didn't even know I was stabbed at first, because those sympathetic nervous system effects, that fight or flight, that adrenaline dump, that's going to mask pain. So your forward thinking as far as throwing something is great. I love where your head is. However, start putting yourself in that other position. If you were that bad guy and somebody threw a package at you, would that really stop you from getting closer? Would that really stop that attack in a sense? I want to put myself in that position, and I want to, let's see, do you want to go to high school? Asking questions, you're engaging. So just be careful on what you engage with. But if you're doing it in a plan to move around and get away, obviously, or turn your body, I like where your head is. You guys are all throwing out great things, but what I would consistently tell you is keep it very clear, keep it concise, keep it short, and keep it directive. Because a directive, guys, especially law enforcement again, when they give directives, you'll hear a lot of times them say, stop resisting, as they're trying to use subject control on somebody. They're saying that as pain compliance, meaning if you listen, this pain goes away. If you listen, this struggle stops. So where this relates to us is, if I give them a directive, a very clear directive of, hey, could you just give me a little bit of space here? Or I need you to back up. That right there shows this person knows exactly what they want from me, and they're being very clear about it. And they will likely oblige by that. And if they don't, you at least now know they're not listening to those directives. So now it might be time to protect myself. So I like where your head is. I like you guys talking, but let's start talking a little bit more about what types of things we're thinking, a little bit more about what types of things I would do that are short and concise, to the point that now I could either defend or get away, create space. What else do we have? Anybody else? All right. So if you guys have some, throw them out there. But let me start talking to you guys a little bit about pre-contact cues. So these are things that we're looking for in an individual as they're starting to heighten, as far as that escalates, when they're starting to escalate, or even a person that wants that complete ambush, but I caught them right before that ambush. There's a few things, there's several things that a human's going to do physically before they actually attack. Some of those things are them reaching for the back of their neck, touching their nose, looking left or right. Even if they're not looking for something, we'll say they're looking for other bystanders, which could be very accurate, right? They're looking for an escape, which could be accurate. But what we noticed, I've watched thousands upon thousands of dash cam videos, officer fights, physical fights, street fights. I've been in fights as far as combat sports, and even in the positions that I used to hold. However, what I can tell you is it's crazy how often somebody will literally just look to their left and right, just move their head before they actually physically move forward or attack. So that's a great pre-contact cue. Some of the really important ones are shifting of the shoulders, clenching the fist, clenching the jaw, shifting their feet, shifting their weight to where their dominant foot is slightly to the rear. Think about a race on a track. Think about somebody that's getting ready to sprint, right? They don't just sprint from a your feet parallel position, feet shoulder width apart, standing straight up. They actually start lunging forward, dominant foot to the rear, and they push off. So just present that as, well, now this person's getting ready to act, physically act. What are they going to do? What does their body look like before they do it? And one of the most important things to understand about the face is it will change. Their face will change. Um, it will go from that or from just a regular face talking to a clenched jaw, and even more importantly than that, their eyes will now start to widen. So there was a study done, and I don't know how many people were part of the study, but I know it was a lot. And I know these numbers that 100% of them, when they were told to press a button as fast as they can within a 10-second segment. So basically, they counted from 10 down to 1. And all you had to do was hit the button, and you had to do it as fast as you can. And they had 10 times to do it. You didn't have to do it on 1, didn't have to do it on 10. You just had to do it as fast as you can within that 10 seconds. When they did that study, 100% of those people that reached out for that button, their eyes widened. If anybody knows anything about football, a defensive back, a cornerback that covers a receiver, they're taught to look at the receiver's eyes. As the ball comes closer to them, that receiver's eyes will start to widen. That's when they put their hand up or turn face the ball. Guys, we're all human. We all do the same things. And the one thing that I could tell you is these people that now you're in this situation that you're attempting to de-escalate, these people will show tells. They're going to show signs. People will always show you what they're going to do physically. They're not just going to stand straight up. And if they are, they're still going to have those subtle little signs that you're going to be able to pick up on, and don't second guess it. The second you start seeing those signs, that's the second you start going back to those three things we talked about, which is proximity, positioning, hands up, because now that's a purely defensive situation. So that's physically de-escalating out of this. So whether it comes from a client that's upset, whether it comes from somebody you cut off, whether it comes from somebody that's been stalking you, it doesn't matter as far as what the reasoning is. What does matter is understanding as a human, those are the signs that they're going to give before an attack. So I'm going to open it up for some questions and some comments and anything that you guys want to finish up with. And just let you guys know that next week we're going to start talking a little bit more about the conflict avoidance as far as really de-escalating verbally and such things as putting things into perspective, not using so much perception also, and just ways to communicate and different ways we can have better interpersonal communication skills. So I'll open it up for you guys, and then if there's nobody here, or we get to the end and you guys want to stay on while Jamie gives us some information, that would be great. So shoot away, everybody.
Just FYI, we have about 4 minutes remaining. Leslie, you had mentioned that you wish you had taken the previous classes. Know that Pinellas County has put these on their YouTube site for you guys to go back and review. And this one will be on the YouTube site as well. So any classes that you miss or want to go back and review, just Jane just posted a link.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. So she's posting those. And also our next class is on Thursday, same time, noon to 1. And I'll make sure Brian has the right link this time.
Yeah, I was sitting on Google Meet for about 10 minutes, like, man, I'm early to this one. I beat everybody here.
So
And I was last to the race.
what questions do you have for Brian real quick?
Yeah, throw
Stacy
some out
says,
there.
how can we make ourselves look like a bad victim? Like you don't want to mess with this person vibes.
Very, very. I'm going to tell you, we talked about this in that last class, but let me just shoot it out for you, just so you know. So when you leave this today, you're looking like a strong, hard target when you're walking to your vehicle. Look like you know where you're going. You know, people will tell these criminals, they do interviews with them all the time, and they consistently say the same thing. We look for people that are not so much not situationally aware, but they look disheveled. They look not organized. They look like they don't have purpose. So, what's the opposite of that? First, have your head on a swivel, make eye contact, get your head up out of your phone for one. Number two, try to keep your hands free. And if you can, at least try to keep one free. Here's the other thing: pick your chin up, chest out, walk proud, and walk exactly like you have somewhere to be and you have to be there now. Because if you look organized and you look like you have purpose, you're creating a harder target for that individual because they want to find that person that is unaware, that person that is not organized, and that person that could be an easier target. So that's just a few ways that you can make yourself look like you're a harder target. But here's a great idea: keep taking these trainings and keep doing anything you can to actually be a hard target. And what happens is, when I start doing these types of trainings, I start building a little bit more confidence because I know, just like we talked about those police officers, I know exactly what to do. I know how to carry myself. You're making yourself a harder target. You're probably missing potential situations that you don't even know about. Is it true women with ponytails are more likely to be attacked due to the ability of an attacker? I don't know if that's actually true. I will tell you that it is it's an easier grab, but if you have hair, I'm a hard target. But if you have hair, you have something to grab onto. If you have a hood, you have something to grab onto. You know, in our abduction prevention, we teach those things on what to do if you're grabbed. But before you take that class, one thing I could tell you is ponytails are great. Wear them all day long, but know what's